And good afternoon, everyone. Charles Moscowitz here. Thanks for joining me this afternoon. And my guest is none other than Cliff Kincaid, who has a long and very, very important record of research going back. He's been with AIM and many other organizations. He's the author of many books, many of which are among my favorite. Cliff, I particularly am a fan of Global Bondage, which I believe I interviewed you on many years ago. You're now heading up America's Survival, which is a very interesting website. Thanks for joining me, Cliff.
Charles, it's great to be with you.
Now, Cliff, I don't even know where to start with you because you've got so much and such a broad series of research. So let's get to two issues that I think we might talk about, and one of which is this kind of, I guess, what you might call a culture kampf going on right now, where American history predictably is being changed and torn down by its symbols. They're taking off black faces off of the cover of pancake mixes. Now it's gotten to the point where they destroyed a statue, or they've taken down a statue of Ulysses S. Grant, who, of course, was the head of the Union Army that liberated, that ended slavery, and then as president crushed the KKK. And here in Massachusetts, in my hometown, they're taking down a statue of Lincoln. So I guess I'd like your take on what's going on with that. Who's behind it? What are they thinking?
Charles, it's a communist revolution. It's what Barack Obama called the fundamental transformation of the United States. It's happening under Trump. We don't see a lot of pushback to it. If you go to my website, usasurvival.org, you'll see I refer to the Trump presidency as a failed presidency. Mm-hmm. He's appointed a lot of bad people. And it's ironic because here was a guy who came into office after starring in a reality show about firing incompetent people. You know, the big line, "You're fired." Well, he's hired so many incompetent, and I would say worse, people surrounding him. I've got a column up about I think I titled it "The Dupes, Dopes, Globalists, and Traitors Around Trump." It's never ending. And the reason why a lot of people don't recognize what's going on as a communist revolution is that we have an incompetent or worse FBI under a Trump appointee, Christopher Wray. And the FBI hasn't been monitoring extremists for years. It's sad. You refer to some of the books I've written. I co-wrote 3 on Obama, wrote a couple on the United Nations. I've been around for a long time, 40 years in the Washington, D.C. area. We all had great hopes when Trump came into office. But I'm telling you, unless he gets his act together. Well, let me quote a friend of mine. I was on the radio show with Brannon House about a week ago. He's a conservative Christian commentator. Mm-hmm. He put it this way, and I agree. He says, if Trump doesn't get his act together, he's going to lose in November to a guy who doesn't even know who his own wife is. I mean, this is how bad it is in the United States today. So I had predicted what's happening. I guess I underestimated how bad the corruption would be. I've learned firsthand how corrupt the, quote, conservative establishment is. They defunded me about a year ago because I dared to expose some of the corruption inside the conservative establishment. I questioned, I protested the appointment of Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court because you may remember he was in the Ken Starr investigation and covered up the Vincent Foster murder.
Yes,
I opposed the Neil Gorsuch Trump nomination. I said the guy can't be trusted. He came out of a liberal church, had a spotty record. I was one of the few who wrote columns critical of him. And now he's betrayed us too. Now he's part of the resistance against the very president who appointed him. I mean, it's bad, and it's going to get worse.
You know, it certainly doesn't look like President Trump has been the conservative leader that we'd hoped for. I'm not quite ready to write him off yet. I think that given what he's been dealing with from the day he stepped into office, which is literally a coup d'etat, and a whole rotten, underground effort that includes obviously Democrats, but also the sort of the mugwump Republicans, the Me Too Republicans. That he's, it's amazing to me that he's able to function at all, and I think that if he wins in November, we have a hope that he could put some of this behind him and get on with the business of the government. I'm hoping. Again, this is pure conjecture on my part, but he's all we have. This is it's either that or we're going to have revolution in this country. I mean, I don't know. I think that we have to get behind him, as flawed as he is.
That's a point of view. And look, we got 4.5 months till the election. I'm on the website or on the email list of moveon.org. And they sent out an email last night saying the Democrats think they have this election in the bag. And but they cautioned the left. They said, don't believe the polls. Trump is winning. That's what MoveOn.org says, because they think things can change month to month. And that's true. And maybe there's going to be divine intervention. Maybe a miracle's going to take place. But I'll tell you, you look back at some of these problems for Trump, they were problems of his own making. Who appointed Jeff Sessions? Who appointed Rod Rosenstein?
Right.
Who appointed Christopher Wray? I mean, I can go through a list of who appointed John Bolton. I
know, it's terrible.
I can go through a list of these bad appointments where Trump should have said, he shouldn't have even waited to say, you're fired. He should have never hired these people in the first place. And then we still wait for justice on the criminal conspiracy that resulted in Russiagate. And what is Bill Barr doing, the Attorney General? Well, what about this so-called independent counsel, Durham? Where is he?
Slow.
We keep hearing, the indictments are just down the road. They're coming around the corner the next week. I mean, how long do we have to wait? We're running out of time, Charles.
No, it's true. I mean, I heard an interesting comment actually on Raw Story that thinks that Bill Barr is going to do an October surprise. I mean, where finally the indictments are going to come down. But no, it's very discouraging, and it's very demoralizing to the slowness of this. It's hard to fathom. I mean, I think that Trump is a pragmatic figure as a businessman who wants to get things done and is willing to compromise to get it done. So yeah, I mean, he's kind of hopefully a bridge figure in terms of helping. I mean, working the establishment while it's our job as conservatives, hopefully joined by well-meaning liberals, to sort of bring back the constitutional system and expose the corruption to enough people that there can be a critical mass, that he can have a mass support to take efforts. But I get the sense that he has somewhat of a siege mentality over there. He feels like he's almost operating alone. I mean, it's amazing to me, given the absolute propaganda and agitprop of the media since he's been in office has been so blatant. You're a media guy. You have a background in it. It's unprecedented that you have the major networks running these stories based on one anonymous source, and then once it's exposed, they throw their hands in the air. Okay, fine. Then they go on to the next one, and it's so openly and brazenly ideological. I guess that a question that comes up in my mind, Cliff, is that why is it then, if Trump is such an establishment figure, and if he is, kind of someone who wants to play ball so much, why are they so hell-bent on getting rid of him?
I think they do want to get rid of him because he challenges the power of the globalists. And I haven't given up on him, but it saddens me when it takes over 3 years for Trump to all of a sudden issue an executive order on social media censorship because it happened to him, because Twitter censored him. Well, a lot of us have been subjected to this for years. And frankly, Trump campaigned in 2016 on a platform of breaking up the big tech monopolies. And nothing has happened except for this weak executive order that is merely a suggestion that, oh, maybe down the road we're going to repeal the Section 230 of the telecommunications law. He only acts when something affects him. I mean, I'm sure it's happened to you, Charles, but I've been targeted in the past. I had a book rejected by Amazon. I was singled out and targeted by the left-wing extremist groups years ago, the Southern Poverty Law Center, the Council on American Islamic Relations, as an extremist. I've been censored. The conservative movement, so to speak, the establishment conservative movement, has worked to defund me because I'm independent. I don't fall into line. I'm still around. I'm still fighting. I've still got my website. People can sign up for free. But now, look what happened in the last week. We've got this website, The Federalist, linked to the McCain family fortune, run by Ben Domenech, who is a plagiarist, a documented plagiarist who got some money somewhere. And all of a sudden he's griping because Google ads are threatening to cut him off. He's not going to get a few crumbs from the platform, from the Google platform. Well, my gosh. And this is all of a sudden a big story. This kind of thing has been, I don't take ads on my website. I just take donations from people who may want to support me. But now it's a big issue on Fox News that, oh, poor Ben Domenech, and who's married to Meghan McCain, who's linked to the Cindy McCain $200 million fortune. They can't get some money from Google. Come on, let's get serious about this problem, ladies and gentlemen. And Fox has been such a disappointment. Even Trump recognizes that. I go back into time. I'm one of the few who have been blowing the whistle on the Drudge Report for years and years and years. Back in 2008, I tried to pay $5,000, $10,000 for ads on the Drudge Report exposing Obama's ties to Frank Marshall Davis, the Soviet inspired Communist Party, really agent of influence, maybe even an espionage agent who was Obama's mentor. In Hawaii before he came over to the United States and went to Harvard and ran for office. Drudge Report refused to even accept my money to expose Obama. That was back in 2008. No wonder it's become an anti-Trump exercise. But all of this is to be expected. The journalism business is corrupt. The politicians are corrupt. The churches are corrupt. I've never seen corruption this bad.
Yeah, it's very pervasive. The Mockingbird media, and when I say Mockingbird, I'm making reference to an information that came out during the church committee hearings in the late 70s that indicated that the CIA, which is part and parcel of this whole liberal agenda, had literally paid cash payments to major figures in the media. Much of that testimony was done behind closed doors, so we don't know who and how pervasive. But there's no indication that that's ever stopped. That was called Operation Mockingbird. So, yeah, the media, both individuals and these entities, which have consolidated into, I think, maybe about less than a half a dozen groups that control the whole story, are very corrupt, and that they've completely lost their objectivity, their moral underpinnings. And so you have small networks like what I'm trying to do here, like you do, who are actually being forced to operate in their venues. So we're subject. I mean, they could pull the plug anytime they want. I've had it happen to me. It's I've been told that I've been shadow banned and all of that, and it's just very, very difficult to function and to actually advance any alternative opinion than the establishment. That's the world we're living in right now. That is the world by which Trump presides. I do think that he understands it. I mean, I heard Trump knows the score. I mean, I heard Tom Hartman, very leftist radio host, mention recently that Trump's father was a secret member of the John Birch Society. Now, to me, that tells me that Trump knows what's going on. If that's true, it probably is, and I hope it is. He
Well, it may be.
understands.
I tell you, Alex Newman is a friend of mine. He's a great American.
Yeah.
There's a lot of great writings and podcast videos for the New American. He has talked about that somehow Trump may be aware of what the John Birch Society was all about, the nature of the overall conspiracy. Let me just say, I don't mean to be bad mouthing everybody. There are some good journalists out there. I'm preparing a review of this book. I just got it. You see this one?
Yeah.
This is dynamite.
Oh, what a story that is. Absolutely.
This is I've got all the Epstein books, Charles.
Yeah.
I've got all. This is by far the best one. It's excellent. And I like the title. It says A Convenient Death.
Oh, I think
Jeffrey Epstein was a con man. The death was a con. And it turns out, according to this book, I'm going to put my column up later today. This is the only book that really goes into Epstein's deep, dark secret that he was actually a homosexual.
You know,
it looks like he was part of a gay pedophile network. Yeah, he had all these girls around him, and maybe he was bisexual, hired some of these girls as prostitutes. But according to the book, he got his wealth and power initially through gay activities targeting a wealthy businessman, got some of his fortune. Then he built up his own little fiefdom, his own money pit, his own millions, maybe up to a half a billion eventually. And in fact, you mentioned Mockingbird. This book talks about Epstein's ties to the CIA and the intelligence community. For what purpose? He was engaging in these activities in order to blackmail people. And here's where it gets, look, I'm not writing off Trump. He could still bounce back and win in November. But here's what disturbs me about this case. Who gave Jeffrey Epstein his first job? It was Bill Barr's father. Bill Barr's father gave Epstein, a college dropout who fudged his resume, his first job teaching students in Manhattan at the Dalton School. Now, Bill Barr has said, well, we're going to get to the bottom of this. It's a perfect storm how he died in that jail cell. You know, all people were just sleeping or watching TV, and he hung himself with a sheet. Come on. And we're still waiting for Bill Barr to get to the bottom of who his co-conspirators were. Where are the tapes? Where are the videos, Charles? I don't mean to cast. It's like the Durham investigation. We wait and wait and wait and wait. Where's the indictments?
I mean, Cliff, I don't mean to cast aspersions. And again, I don't have any hard evidence of this, but I think that Bill Barr was Attorney General under George H.W. Bush at the time of the Franklin cover-up. I don't know if you're up on that scandal, but it was a national, if not an international, child sex ring that involved a lot of Republicans and this guy, Larry King, not the talk show host, but another Larry King, who ran this, I guess you'd basically call it a brothel in Washington, D.C., and that they would provide children and young people for sex parties all over the country, mostly for Republicans. So, I mean, it's a murky, dark understory. There's a lot of stuff coming out, actually connecting Hollywood and Jeffrey Epstein and this international pedophile ring. I mean, this is a big, big subject that we should get into that.
And it's not, and Charles, it's not just Epstein, but the evidence in this book suggests he was gay, and that was his real motivation. The girls, the assistants, the young females, that may have been part of it, but I'm almost convinced that was a cover story. The big thing was this homosexual pedophile ring. This book talks about how Epstein's network would offer kids, not just females, kids, to the world's elites. That's in this book. Now, let's go into another scandal that's out there that we're waiting on somebody to break open. And I'm going to quote to you and your audience from a local Washington, D.C. priest. I've got the links, the video up on my website. Here's what he said. This is on Saturday night, Sunday. This is a pastor, a Monsignor, Roman Catholic priest in the D.C. diocese. Quote, "The church is now engaged in a cover-up of the predatory sexual activity and corrupting practices of Theodore McCarrick, who once served as our archbishop, who has now been thrown out of the priesthood. But who promoted him?" This is a priest asking these questions. Who promoted him? Who protected him? Who did he pay off? None of that has been revealed, though it is known. It is in a report. But the powers of darkness in Rome keep us from knowing, and it is not right. And this particular priest, let me give you the rest of part of the quote. And this is going to be a good one. Mm-hmm. He said, this is a priest, an active priest in a church in D.C. He says, "When I graduated from high school 61 years ago, entered the seminary, and then the priesthood, I never imagined that the church could be as corrupt as the church has proven to be." And he went on to point out that a lot of these Catholic dioceses around the country going bankrupt. Why? Financial settlements to sex abuse victims.
Right. Oh, yeah, that's a big story that goes back to in Boston, that story broke with Cardinal Law. And that the problem, I think, with the Catholic Church, as much as I admire the Catholic Church, is that it's a closed society, it's a secret society, it's a hierarchy. And when you have a situation like that at such a high level and at such an international level, then it only takes a little corruption to get into the system that can really corrupt the whole thing. It's like the old saying, a few bad apples can ruin the whole bunch. And I think that they need to find a way to clean up their own Augean stable, so to speak. And
I'm familiar with what happened in Boston, the Boston Globe Spotlight investigative team that exposed the horrible sexual abuse and corruption there. We need more journalists like that who are going to dig, like the authors of this book, dig into the church, dig into the Epstein network, dig into the Department of Justice, the CIA, and the intelligence community, because the corruption is so deep, and we're talking about victims here who are kids. Oh,
it's despicable.
Trump ought to be in the Oval Office pounding on the desk for answers to all of this.
Now, I understand, Cliff, in defense of Trump, that, and again, I can't verify this, but my understanding is that Trump is going after this problem. I mean, if you take a look at the average number of people convicted of sex trafficking crimes and other crimes during the Bush and Obama years, it averaged about 200 to 250 a year. When Trump became president, that figure skyrocketed up to about 2,000 a year. And there's rumors, and again, I'm not verifying this, that it's been suggested that that because this is why you have like certain people in the media, some of these late night idiots like Kimmel and Colbert and them, and actors like De Niro and Baldwin and these people, why they despise Trump so much and why they go after him in the ugliest, most vicious way that ever. It's because he is going after this problem, and that they are afraid that they might be caught up in that scandal.
Well, maybe not. I just, all of this is speculation. I want to see some indictments. I want to see these networks cleaned out. I want to find out who killed Epstein. Why isn't McCarrick being indicted? Why is the Roman Catholic Church under Pope Francis covering up the nature of this abuse, as the priest said, who was part of it, who covered it up, who got paid off? I mean, what is Bill Barr doing? All that President Trump can do after a church 1 block from the White House gets burned out by the communist protesters, he walks across the street and holds up a Bible. Well, my gosh, I believe in the Bible. I want to see divine intervention too. But we need troops in the cities to stop the burning and looting. And Trump is yeah, he's always been a victim of the deep state. Now he's got, as he said in his Tulsa rally the other day, he's under assault by the military industrial complex. He's got a Defense Secretary, Mark Esper, that openly is insubordinate. He says, nah, we're not going to deploy the troops. Forget what the president says. And then we got the Joint Chiefs of Staff Chairman, Mark Milley, doing a little video saying, I should have been part of that photo op in front of the church. Openly insubordinate. This is like the 7 Days in May a scenario of that old movie, except now the globalists are the military brass.
No, it's, I mean, President Truman fired MacArthur for a lot less than that. You know,
and this is the point. What happened to that old Trump in the old reality show, The Apprentice? You're fired. Why hasn't he fired Esper? Why hasn't he fired Milley? Why did he hire Bolton in the first place? And here's the sad thing about the campaign. And I have a column up. I think I refer to it as Dumb and Dumber. His 2020 campaign chairman, Brad Parscale, is consulting Karl Rove on how to win.
Oh, terrible.
You got to be kidding me.
He's lost so many elections for so many people. That's crazy.
Yeah, he blew $300 million in the Mitt Romney campaign. Look what Mitt Romney's doing today, marching with Black Lives Matter.
Although he did have one good, funny comment, I thought that might work for the election. He said the best way to defeat Joe Biden is to get him out of the basement and make him talk. Bring him up.
He's not going to come out of the basement.
Yeah, that's right. Well, the more the public can see him.
He's not going to debate. He's not going to. He's going to refuse the debates. Why should he debate? He'll just coast right in.
Yeah. Well, that's a nice thought. That's an optimistic thought. Here we are, you know, in the precipice. I mean, after having gone through this complete lockdown for 3 months, we were all told that if we step outside the door, we could get arrested, and then have race riots after, where you have these communist gangs going in and burning black businesses, looting black businesses, killing black people. Now you have them say the police are being told to pull back. So you have the largest night of murder and in Chicago's history, in Chicago in about 50 years, and same thing with St. Louis. And now this. Now we're going to have Trump lose. I mean, it's you know, it really makes me you know, concerned for the future of this republic.
People have got to exercise independent judgment. There's a lot of people on each side. It's polarized. Some hate Trump, some love Trump. I'm a journalist. I do independent stories, independent analysis. And this is my independent view that he's preparing to lose this election. You cannot win when your campaign chairman, Parscale, consults somebody like a Karl Rove. Karl Rove is the guy that told the Republicans when Obama was running, oh, don't call him a socialist. No, don't do that.
That's terrible. I mean, that's election that should have been won.
That's going to alienate the Democrats, and we need those Democrat votes. This is Karl Rove. And when you have that kind of guy coming into the White House advising the Trump campaign, I say they're preparing to lose.
Yeah, well, if they're going to follow that advice, then yes, they certainly are. Cliff, you know, what are you working on now? I mean, you know, you've given me a great idea with the Epstein book. I saw a documentary about Epstein that was a cover-up, I think, although it did touch on this issue of his having, you know, a gay relationship with this multi-billionaire. And he was asked about that during one of his depositions. You had Dershowitz there saying, I've never done anything like this. And I watch for symbolism now. And I mean, maybe that's, I'm putting on a tin hat here, but right after he said it, he made like a Masonic symbol like this. He went with his hand, you know, very openly. Now, I don't know if this, you know, I don't know if you study that aspect of things, but
well, look, Dershowitz defends these criminals, and he's proud of it. Another one of Epstein's attorneys was Ken Starr.
Yes.
The same Ken Starr who became famous on Fox News, who ran the Clinton investigation, and whose prosecutor covered up the murder of Vincent Foster. And who was that prosecutor? Brett Kavanaugh.
And whatever happened to what's his name over there at Newsmax magazine, Christopher Ruddy, who wrote the book The Murder of Vince Foster, and it seems was so well documented and so obviously a murder. Well, he seems to have backed away.
Yeah, he became friends with the Clintons, and that Newsmax is now what passes for conservative media today, along with Fox News. I got a friend or two over at Newsmax. They do good work. There's some good that comes out of it. The good that comes out of Fox News is the Tucker Carlson show. That guy has got courage. And I watch that every night. He takes on Trump. He takes on Republicans. He takes on the Democrats. But let me get back to the Masonic stuff. I don't put a lot of stuff. The reason is George Washington, our nation's founder, was a Mason.
Right. No, exactly. And I don't know much about it either, but it is a possible recipe for corruption.
Here's the difference. There are good Masons, just like anything. There are good people and bad people. There are good Masons and bad Masons. Washington himself referred to some of the evil, subversive Masonic lodges in Europe, and some of them had been infiltrated. That's true.
Yes.
Just like a lot of groups have been infiltrated by bad people, the communists and others. But the Masons, for the most part, in the United States, were good people. Right. George Washington, many of our founders were Masons. I think they were good people. They gave us a Republican form of government, the best ever. And now we're on the verge of losing it because of these unaccountable bureaucracies, the deep state, the military-industrial complex, not to mention the corruption of the so-called conservative establishment. I mean, who gave Trump these two duds of Supreme Court nominees, Gorsuch and Kavanaugh? Who gave it to Trump? The Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation. You know where Mark Esper came from? He was a chief of staff at the Heritage Foundation. Can you believe it?
Unbelievable.
And that's where you got these big conservative foundations like SCAFE putting all of their money into the Heritage Foundation, the Federalist Society, and they gave us Gorsuch, who gives us one of the, I think, probably in addition to gay marriage decision, Roe v. Wade, this LGBTQ rights, Brodsky, whatever the name of it was, this recent decision, one of the three worst decisions in the history of the country, authored by a conservative justice given to us by the Federalist Society and the Heritage, and sent up by Trump, and who gets joined by John Roberts, a George W. Bush appointee, and the four liberals. Doesn't that tell you something about the corruption of the conservative establishment in this country?
It does. And just to touch again on the issue of Masonry, my only objection to it is that I am not comfortable, especially as an American, with societies that take secret oaths of allegiance to each other, because if you have that tends to be corrupt. That's my main complaint with the Catholic Church, too. It's not that it's a bad organization, and it's not that there aren't a lot of good people there, and it's not that they don't have a good philosophy, but if you're going to take an oath of allegiance to your fellow members over the Constitution, over anything else, even over your own family, then to me that is a corrupting element, and it certainly can be. So,
it can be, but most people join it just to do humanitarian efforts for people, to help the kids. It's a sort of a country club. And as I say, people like George Washington, our nation's founder, recognized there were some bad people in it, mostly in Europe. But he said the American Masonic lodges
was not infiltrated.
Exactly. So there are conspiracies out there. Communism is an open conspiracy. This is my beef with Christopher Wray at the FBI and with Trump himself, who says, well, I'm going to declare Antifa a terrorist organization. Antifa is just one of probably 20 or 30 of these communist groups out there, and Antifa is only relatively recent. I openly post on my website links to these communist groups that are calling for revolution in the United States. And why don't the FBI agents go after them? Because some of them you can trace back to Barack Hussein Obama.
What is the deal with NT? Are they? What is the connection, if any, to George Soros?
George Soros is smart enough not to fund specific people, specific Antifa members that I know about. But as somebody, we did one of our first conferences on Soros. We called it the Soros Files. What Soros does, he funds the groups that provide the communists and the Antifa members. He funds the groups that provide the rioters and the protesters. One of his famous groups, a lot of people don't know about, that Soros funded, was called Critical Resistance. This is a group that calls for abolishing prisons, not just defunding the police, abolishing prisons. It was co-founded by Angela Davis of the Communist Party.
Sure. I am very troubled by the existence of this so-called CHOP in Seattle, claiming to be a sovereign state, building up a wall. And besides the fact that it's run by gangs who are going around and raping people, and there's been already at least one murder, and that they engage in extortion of businesses at force, at gunpoint, they are claiming sovereign status. I've heard rumors that they might be trying to reach out to the United Nations. They're also perhaps trying to agitate with more radical elements in some of the Native American reservations. This, to me, is a recipe for a civil war. And I think that the fact that the governor and the mayor of Seattle and the governor of Washington are just letting it go on, every day it goes on, it poses a greater danger to our sovereignty and our unity and our independence. What do you think?
How many times has President Trump tweeted out in reference to that situation, law and order? How many times has he tweeted out, law and order, if you don't clean up this mess, I will? I mean, aren't we in the 10th or 11th day of this CHOP or Chaz? And Trump does nothing.
Right.
Now,
afraid to pull the trigger.
If he doesn't want to do anything, fine. Don't make empty threats. This is what's so frustrating. If you don't intend to clean up this mess, stop the burning, stop the groups from overturning the statues, then just be quiet, Mr. President. And, don't get our hopes up that you're going to save the country just by tweeting out some threats. I'm getting, frankly, Charles, sick of it.
Yeah, it is discouraging. I mean, I would hope, I actually don't think the answer is to call out the army, but I do think that there's a way to starve them out, and just sort of put a ring of steel around it and let them, come out with their hands up eventually. I mean, but something has to be done. To let that fester like that it creates, a fact on the ground, so to speak, and one that's a very dangerous precedent.
Is. It's a terrible thing, but
yeah,
it's just a microcosm of where the whole country's going. I'm sure a lot of I've seen on Tucker Carlson's show that they're growing dope in this Chaz, and I'm sure probably 99% of them are stoners.
Yeah. Well, I've seen somebody in there released a video on Facebook that said that that the people are being raped and attacked by these gangs who show up at night. And, this guy was raped in front of his children and wife because he defied them. And there's all these other stories. Now, again, I can't verify any of it, but, the police aren't allowed in there. And it's just to me, it's a classic example of a totalitarian state. I hope that maybe if we can get some truth out about this, then the light will be shined on this, and that'll augur very poorly for the radicals who are basically controlling the Democratic Party now, because the American people are going to see it and they're going to be like, no, this is horrendous.
Well, let me tell you, ultimately, yeah, we can do all that. And I'm happy to work with you and any like-minded people to get out the truth on this or a multitude of issues. But in the bottom line is that you and I, our families, people like us, we've got to get armed. We've got to
Yep.
protect our own lives and our own families because it looks like the government's not going to do it. You know, I got a book on my shelf back there written way before the riots, way before the current trends. And it was titled Dial 911 and Die, meaning that you can't depend on the police. And the police, even now, a lot
Yep.
of them are calling in sick. They're not going to be deployed. The mayors won't let them clean up the mess. You got to, ladies and gentlemen, protect yourselves. Use your heads and understand, get to a place that's safe.
Yeah, especially now that they're going to replace policemen with psychiatrists and social workers.
And
Anyways,
we know in California now they're trying to put limits on the amount of ammunition you can buy.
right. But yet there's been a huge upsurge in gun purchases, including and particularly in the minority community where they really need to do this and to figure out how to protect their families. Because if they're gonna start to defund the police, that's going to be a disaster. The drug gang, everyone will be caught in the crossfire of drug gangs. Anyway, Cliff, let my listeners and viewers know how they can read your excellent work and your website and anything else.
Appreciate that, Charles. It's great to be on with you. My website is usasurvival.org, usasurvival.org. There should be a pop-up that asks you to sign up for a newsletter. If not, just fill out the contact form at the top. And I don't sell books directly anymore. A number of my books, 3 on Obama, are available through Amazon. My old UN books, you were so kind to mention one of those. They're basically out of print. I do have one, Global Taxes for World Government, which I have made available as a PDF. I think that's up on my website somewhere. If you can't find it, just email me, Kincaid, Kincaid at Comcast.net, and I'll make sure you get access to that. But my website's free. If you want to donate, if you want to help us, I'd like to start a show. Maybe I could do a show like this with you on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
We had a very good TV show at one time. We even had it up on Roku, and
Roku's
then
a good venue. It's run by a good conservative.
It is, but unfortunately, I've gone through a lot of these attacks over the years. All of a sudden, I got threatened with a lawsuit.
Oh my God!
So we had to almost dismantle a lot of our activities in order to prepare for a defense. It drained our resources. We're really operating on a skeleton basis now. I don't get a salary. I'm a volunteer. But we do it. I do it because I've been in this business for 40 years, and I don't want to see the country go down the crapper.
I saw your page on the Southern Poverty Law Center, and it was filled with a lot of crap. I mean, it was just ridiculous. It's just and it was so blatantly political. Oh, he's taken positions on this and that and the other thing, which is true. But why are they? It's like, yeah. So I mean, isn't this a free country? It's ridiculous. I mean,
that's just a targeted operation, trying to drive people out of business, ruin their lives, dry up their income. I don't, like I said earlier, the fact that one website doesn't get some crumbs from Google ads, big deal. Why depend on Google in the first place? I mean, they got access to the McCain family fortune anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, keep your mind about you, keep your head straight. Understand how probably 95% of what you see, read, and hear is beside the point and irrelevant and trivial. Understand, Chris, go to reputable, reliable sources of information like my page, yours, and rely on them and spread that word.
Exactly. Well, Cliff, next time I have you back, I'd like to talk a little bit more about alternative media and where one can develop, their own media platform and get good, accurate information from genuine patriots and from people who actually are doing the kind of investigation that you've spent your life doing. And again, I want to thank you for joining me. It's been an honor and a pleasure.
And thank you. And I just want to make reference to what's behind me, Mao Zedong. You want to understand this Maoist revolution. We've got articles about that too. A lot of this traces back to Mao, the Cultural Revolution, and Maoist involvement in the United States, including, quote, support for the Afro American struggle or liberation struggle, as Mao put it. Mao met personally with black communist revolutionaries. People have to, the FBI doesn't know anything about it. They're totally clueless, but we got the information on that.
Oh, that's incredible. And that's the tip of the iceberg on that one. All right, Cliff, thanks so much.
Thank you, Charles. Good luck to you.
Thank you.